Alright, say it with me everyone. Another penis video? You said the last one was gonna be your last. Yeah, I know. I did. Look, my audience is mostly men. It's like an 85-15 split. And as we've seen, 90% of our sex hangups stem from our members. And our perceived inadequacies. Their size, shape, everything. So of course I'm gonna hit on these topics often. My goal is to systematically dismantle your insecurities piece by piece. And I for one feel like we've made some decent headway. We've come a long way, but there's a specific side of phallus size that we have yet to cover. Stereotypes. And I'm just gonna rip the band-aid off. You know the classics. Black men have bigger ones, Asian men have smaller ones, etc, etc. And I could just wrap all this up right now. They're not true because of XYZ, boom, video done. But in doing my research for this one in particular, I discovered that not only are these not true, but there are some really interesting theories as to why they even exist in the first place, and how they've been able to thrive in this modern society. Because these aren't new. These have been around for generations, but they haven't gone away. I mean, they are very damaging. Perpetuating them is insensitive at best and inherently racist at worst. A side note, this video will try to be apolitical. It's hard when you're talking about a topic like this, but I think most people, no matter what size you're on, can agree that stereotypes in general are kind of a negative thing, not very good for society. So I don't think that's entirely controversial. You know, I'm not on a woke tirade trying to tell you how a certain group is responsible for all the world's problems. That's not what I'm doing. Stereotyping is a serious topic, but that doesn't mean we can't have a lighthearted, casual conversation about them, largely removed from politics. Oh, one more thing before we start. I wanted to give a shout out to Solace Inc., a game made by one of the users on our Discord server. They've included a Candles recruit that you can unlock in the game. It's really cool, and you should check it out. I played it myself, and it's pretty fun. So, let's take a journey, find out why these stereotypes exist, and what we can do to fix them. Now, as we speak, I can hear some asshole in the comments typing, "Oh, but I found this study that shows a definitive link between race and dick size. It's called Rushton's theory." I have one thing to say to you.
You are made of stupid.
There are a few modern studies out there that claim to have found links between race and penis size. However, they've rightly come under fire for the researcher being an advocate for race realism, which proposes that the major races can be sorted into a strange human hierarchy based on their reproductive strategies. It's an insane take on the human race. I don't want to get into too much detail on it, but censored, this is a word that he uses unironically. Yeah, not good. Seriously, if you try to read this, you will be shocked at some of the, abhorrently racist language. Thankfully, we have another writer debunking this supposed link between race and size. The reproductive strategies mentioned in Rushton's study were associated with a whole suite of mental and physical characteristics, including brain size, intelligence, criminality, and of course, penis length. So according to this idiot, African men have the smallest brains and the largest penises, whereas Asian men are the opposite, big brains, small dicks. This has been described as a sort of Goldilocks theory of race, in which, conveniently, European men are just right, having a combination of high intelligence and a reasonable endowment. His theory has also been criticized for naivete about sexual matters. He assumed that larger genital size means less sexual restraint, meaning more intercourse and therefore more procreation, meaning baby making. These assumptions are pretty unjustified as humans regularly engage in non-procreative sexual activity. Furthermore, sexual mores within a society can change within a generation, from prudishness to permissiveness and back again. Basically, this study linking race and size equates a bigger size with more intercourse, and therefore more children born from them. But, as we know, humans have been known to engage in sexual activity without the intention of procreation, i.e., just doing it to have fun. And here's the last oopsie doopsie from this guy. He attempts to justify his belief that there are differences between races in penis length on the basis that European and Asian males have lower levels of testosterone than Africans, and that the reduction of testosterone had the effect of reducing penis length. Like any good researcher does, he cites his sources, namely Widotsky and Green, 1940. Now that's all well and good. At least he was smart enough to cite his sources. Except there's one problem with this. Widotsky and Green is actually a study on the effects of sex hormones on the penises of rich. Good job, guys. You were so close.
We're the rich.
So essentially, the only study we have that supposedly confirms this stereotype as being true is complete nonsense. So now that we have established the strength of the opposing argument, let's dive straight into the first stereotype. The first of our stereotypes we'll cover in this video is the small Asian stereotype. Not in stature, but of course, penis size. It's the idea that Asian men, on average, have smaller than average members. So this is one that I did not know about until I started to do research for this specific video. Yeah, I know. Apparently it's a popular stereotype, but I've never heard of it before. Outside of like maybe that one Family Guy joke.
The penises, while tiny, are extremely efficient.
That's it. I think that's because you don't really see it that much in the pornography world. The main race stereotype when it comes to penises, you know what it is, I know what it is. That one has more of a prevalence in porn search terms, not this one. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's difficult, to say the least, to find the exact origin of this stereotype. As far as I can tell, it's much less researched than the other one. But what we do know is that it started as a way to emasculate Asian men, meaning to take away their perceived masculinity. As a society, we place a high importance on penis size as a symbol of masculinity. This is generally true of most communities, notably the gay community, where I actually learned that in the gay community, penis size is kind of like a worse mental thing than with heterosexual couples. So, what easier way would there be to emasculate a man than to start a rumor that his member is less than stellar? There's a similar idea that Asian men tend to be bottoms in gay relationships, because men with smaller ducks are often associated with being bottoms in gay relationships. However, this is more of a reflection of what is expected of them rather than their actual desire. Remember that concept. What you desire versus what is expected. We will come back to that. This specific rumor about Asian men is an attempt of an overall perception that East Asian men are less sexually desirable to women compared to men of other races, especially whites. You'll find out soon that this line of thinking isn't exclusive to this stereotype, but anyway. Is it true? Is this stereotype factual? Unsurprisingly, no, it's not. As I stated, there's little official research that's been done on this one specifically, but I have collected some anecdotal stories that attempt to prove it to be true or false. Escort here. Seen a ton of penises over the course of 3 years. I can't speak for the entire population, but from what I've seen, most Asian men I've encountered are on the average, slightly thinner side. Smallest I've ever seen on an Asian man was about 2 inches fully erect. That being said, I've also seen 2-3 inches on Caucasian, Persian, Latino, and Indian man as well. It's not an exclusively Asian trait. Heck, I've seen a 3-incher on a black man as well. Stereotypes are stereotypes. Inaccurate and in no way a correct representation of the general populace. But not every experience is that cut and dry. The next story is from an article where a white woman in her 30s is exclusively attracted to Asian men. And yet another writer gives a criticism of their perspective. I'm a straight white woman in my early 30s. In theory, I've always been into men of all races. But in practice, most of my exes are Latino and white. In September, I met this really handsome Chinese American guy, and I feel like he rewired me. I've been exclusively attracted to Asian guys since. I'm not writing to ask if this is racist, because I'm not asking these guys to, like, speak Korean to me in bed or do any role-playing stuff.
Let me put it in a language you can understand. Oh, so sorry. No charm in here. You deliver. Wrong place.
We just date and have sex, same as my past relationships. But if any of these dudes saw my Tinder matches, they'd be like, this woman has a thing for Asian guys. Which I do, but it's pretty new. Is this normal? Do people just change preferences like that? Also, can you do a PSA about Asian dicks? In my recent but considerable experience, they run the gamut from average to gigantic. If small Asian dicks were a thing, I would have encountered at least one by now. That shit is a myth. Now I do have to call out two things before I get to this writer's response. One, you're seeing bigger dicks because generally guys with bigger dicks have more confidence, therefore are getting Tinder matches.
And what gave you the confidence?
Delusion.
And or are on Tinder, or are even trying to date in general. I went over this in my hookup culture video, but virginity rates are on the rise, so only the top, etc. % of men are actually getting dates, yada yada. But number two, it doesn't sound like this is a preference, it sounds like you're missing the first guy. And that's just it. Sounds like you still have some unresolved feelings for him, but whatever. It's a nice sentiment from this woman trying to dispel the small Asian myth, but it might fall into the realm of virtue signaling, which could actually explain why this stereotype exists. This story was reviewed by another author, who's critical of the original author and her perspective. Here's my general take on race-specific sexual preferences. So long as you can see and treat your sex partners as individuals and not just as objects, we are all also objects, and so long as you can express your preferences without coming across as racially insensitive, and so long as you've interrogated your preferences to make sure they're actually yours and not a mindless desire for what you've been told you're supposed to want, i.e. the currently prevailing beauty standard or its equally mindless rejection, the transgressive fetishization of the other, then it's okay to seek out sex and or romantic partners of a particular race under those exact conditions. This critic has first established their opinion that under ultra-specific circumstances, having a quote-unquote preference of race, meaning a preference of background and culture for your partner, isn't inherently a bad thing. It just needs to be detached from all stereotypes, and it shouldn't be the only metric by which you judge a potential partner. You know, choosing a boyfriend isn't like picking bread at the store. I don't think you have the right to be that picky. Or at the very least, you need to put in a little more consideration so you're not just shopping for them like they're objects. Quote from the critic, "It doesn't sound like her newfound preference for Asian men has anything to do with the uncomfortable fetishization of the culture. It's good that she's not asking them to speak Korean or do anything like that. Something that's been asked of me before, and it's a bummer, trust me."
Oh, so sorry.
Her interest in Asian men seems to be mostly an aesthetic thing, which you certainly can't fault her for. There's a lot of hot Asian dudes out there. You know, it's not uncommon for people later in life to discover that they're attracted to something they've never even considered sexy before. Full-grown adults are out here discovering their bi damn near every day, he says. But she went 30 years before she saw one Asian man she was attracted to, and now this guy has, in her words, rewired her to be only attracted to Asian men? Sounds like there's something else going on here, on the subconscious level. Some kind of inherent bias. In his own words, if she was chill about it and just started adding Asian men into the mix, this wouldn't seem like an issue. But from what I can gather, she has shifted to exclusively having sex with Asian men and rejecting everyone else, purely based on the fact that they're not Asian. And she feels the need to write a letter on this topic. That feels like a red flag, and yet I can't pinpoint exactly why. It's interesting because what this critic is struggling to pinpoint is something I've also had trouble with in the past. When we criticize people with these sorts of opinions, we're basically criticizing their preferences, which leads to an interesting question. Are we even allowed to criticize preferences at all if they're just that, preferences? Can I criticize a woman for requiring her man to be at least 9 inches? Are people allowed to have their own preferences and have it not be a problem? This is something that I can't fully answer in this video, but I'd love to dive deeper into that very topic later on. But he continues. Maybe you're just making up for lost time. Maybe you're getting all the Asian dick you can now to make up for all the Asian dick you missed out on before you ran into that one impossibly hot Asian dude. And your desires/preferences/Tinder profile will achieve a racially harmonious equilibrium at some point. Basically, he's giving her the benefit of the doubt, throwing in the idea that she's just on an Asian kick, and it'll simmer out eventually. But whether you remain exclusively attracted to Asian guys for the rest of your life or not, make sure you don't treat Asian guys like you're doing them a favor by sitting on their gamut-running penises. He's brought forth the idea that she might be virtue signaling, a term that's often thrown around when talking about the new Hollywood and its woke agenda. But it has a meaning that's a little more important than that. As a social term, it actually means the public expression of opinions or sentiments intended to demonstrate one's good character or social conscience or the moral correctness of one's position on a particular issue. In layman's terms, it's like interrupting the conversation to make a politically correct statement just to make you feel good about yourself. Our critic finishes his breakdown with this statement: "I'm weary of people with a specific racial preference for Asian men. And it's less out of a fear of being fetishized, though that's certainly part of it, and more because of the implicit power imbalance that exists in those relationships. It's all artificially constructed by culture, of course, but I'm acutely aware that society views Asian men as less masculine and therefore less desirable." You could say it's somewhat of a script that we've all been implicitly taught to follow. And I've learned that guys who have a preference for Asian men sometimes bring a certain kind of entitlement to our interactions, i.e., you should feel lucky I'm paying you this kind of attention. And that's gross. It doesn't sound like she's doing that, but something about this letter makes me feel like she wants to be congratulated for being woke enough to consider dating Asian guys. She'd do well to keep this stuff behind the curtain. No one wants to feel like someone was into them only because of some witch's curse a hot Chinese American guy put them on at some bar. And I'm inclined to agree with this guy. The idea of the small Asian may be a stereotype perpetuated by virtue signaling. You're probably smaller, so I'm doing you a favor by agreeing to sleep with you. So it's important to recognize this stereotype as something that exists. If you have a preference, by all means, I can't stop you. But that little bit of empowerment could make some men and women feel superior by giving the Asian guy a chance, when they really should be giving chances to guys they find attractive, unrelated to race. Also, just want to call out, there's a subreddit out there that completely disproves the small Asian myth. If you know, you know, but I want you to know that I go through all the research that's required of me to find the truth. Now, here we go. The BBC stereotype. British Broadcasting Corporation. It's unfortunate.
Come on, you bitch.
Alright, this one I'm a little more familiar with because it's been more heavily reinforced by the major porn sites. Longtime viewers may know that I haven't exactly been super critical of these porn sites in general, but I will be particularly critical of them in this video, because they are very guilty in perpetuating this stereotype. I think we've all heard it before, so there's no use in mincing words. In layman's terms, it's the idea that black men have significantly larger penises relative to everyone else. Plain and simple. It's an idea that's sort of the opposite of the Asian man stereotype. Instead of trying to emasculate black men, this stereotype serves to identify black men as the opposite, overly masculine, aggressive, dangerous. If my comments section is anything to go off of, this stereotype affects black men a lot. In fact, it was a comment from a black man with an average-sized duck that inspired me to make this entire video. It's a particularly damaging stereotype, because it's promising something that isn't true most of the time. Sure, it happens, but not more often than other men, and not to the degree spread around by the internet. I love how this particular black author puts it. I'm also black, and the word is that all black men have a large phallus. Not sure where I was when they gave them out. I obviously skipped kindergarten that day. Yeah, I think we all missed that handout. Wait, kindergarten? Long before I began dating, I was aware of the perception that to be a black man is to have a large penis. Therefore, it is likely that this insecurity would present for me regardless of the ethnocultural background of my sexual partner. No matter who you're dating, this idea persists, making it inherently difficult for the black community to separate itself from this trend. So where does this stereotype come from? Surely the population in power wouldn't spread a rumor like this, because it makes all black men look more desirable, right? That doesn't make sense. Well, it's complicated, because an oppressive, largely white population did start this rumor, but back then, dick size was not viewed the same as it is today. This particular stereotype started as a form of racial oppression. Back then, larger phalluses were believed to be strongly correlated with two other traits: lower intelligence and higher aggression. So the idea that all black men had larger penises was spread to make more people scared of black individuals. It was a fear tactic. Historically, black men were described as subhuman, animalistic, and lust-driven. This would eventually lead to the reasoning that black men are a sexual threat to society and are prone to abusing white women, an idea gruesomely depicted in the controversial film Birth of a Nation. These accusations were used to justify the lynching of black men. For example, 14-year-old African-American Emmett Till was kidnapped and brutally murdered for reportedly flirting with a white woman. It's a part of our history that we like to forget, but it's important not to, because it forms the basis of why this stereotype exists in the first place. Back then, phallus size was thought to be related to aggression, so the rumor was started that black men had larger penises, leading one to conclude that black men were inherently more aggressive. So that's how it started. But the reasoning behind the rumor has shifted. I don't think the average woman or gay man believes in the mythical status of the BBC because they have an interest in perpetuating racial oppression. That doesn't sound right. Maybe there's one or two that do, but no. I think the modern evolution of this idea has transitioned to one of excitement, as seen with the wider porn industry taking this idea and just running away with it. So while the Asian stereotype may have evolved as a consequence of virtue signaling, it seems that the black stereotype evolved as a consequence of, ooh, I've never tried black dick before. This will be a cool new experience. Author and professor Gail Dines accurately reported the ways in which the porn industry plays upon sexual racism. Many of the adult movies with black men in starring roles use racial themes in the title, and often as the film's primary selling point. Titles such as Big Black Dicks, Little White Chicks, and There's a Black Man in My Wife's Ass. Have they found him yet? Send in the search team. These are a microcosm of the porn industry's perpetuation of black male sexual stereotypes. In these cases, the trope includes exacerbation of the notion of black male obsession with white females, which was often used to justify the lynching of those same black males. I don't know about you, but I am sort of morbidly curious about all of this. It's so strange and unpredictable that one of the worst fear-based stereotypes in history evolved into a simple porn search term in less than one generation. Like, how did we get here? As we saw with the whole white woman in her 30s dating an Asian man story, these stereotypes continue partially because of race play and the historical power imbalance in the relationship. With Asian men, there's a fantasy of domination. With black men, there's a fantasy of being dominated. Race play is a controversial bedroom activity that deserves its own video, definitely. But it's important to go into any sexual situation with the knowledge that roleplay is consensual and fictional. I'd like to end this section on a quote from one of the authors we heard from because it's just so accurate. As for television, I am still waiting on a male equivalent to Sex in the City, a space for men to authentically talk about our experiences, hopes, dreams, and fears in reference to sex and sexuality. Discussing our insecurities in particular may be a path towards liberation from our societally imposed hypermasculine prison. Remember, you're as healthy as your secrets. Couldn't have said it better myself. The small Asian and the BBC are some of the most seen and most studied stereotypes when it comes to penis size. But this isn't where it ends. Another stereotype is that Indian men have small phalluses. There's also the ones floating around that height and shoe size can predict penile length, which are also shown to be untrue if you've read any modern study. Before we close out this video, I'd like to present a theory as to why these modern stereotypes are so hard to get rid of. Sexual scripting theory. Sexual scripting theory provides a useful framework for examining race-based sexual stereotypes and understanding how sexual stereotyping shapes partnering practices. The theory posits that sexuality, like race, is socially constructed in that individuals develop and understand their sexuality in conjunction with powerful historical and cultural forces that shape social life. Essentially, it's the theory that, similar to race, sexuality can be viewed as something cultural and can influence ideas on the individual level, often subconsciously. Similar to partnering behaviors, sexual scripts are locally derived and take on different forms and meanings according to the cultures and subcultures in which they are embedded. According to the theory, sexual behavior is best understood as a function of cultural scripts, i.e., instructions for sexual conduct that are part of the cultural narratives and symbols that guide social behavior, interpersonal scripts, i.e., structured patterns of interaction influenced by shared norms within subcultures and groups, and intrapsychic scripts, i.e., plans and fantasies through which individuals think about their past, current, and future sexual behaviors. These scripts, individually and in tandem, inform and guide people's sexual behaviors, preferences, and identities, and provide meaning to what might be considered appropriate sexual desires and activities. So according to this theory, basically, when people engage in sexual activity, they might subconsciously consult a certain narrative when they decide to get down and dirty. This narrative has been implicitly taught to them through media, through parenting, and through the perpetuation of stereotypes. For example, a white woman and a black man decide to have sex. Because of this kind of relationship's cultural significance, the sex might naturally follow a pattern where the woman expects to be dominated by the man. She may even expect him to be rough with her. Whether they realize it or not, they're both following a script. There has been some criticism of this theory, with critics arguing that the idea of sexual encounters having subconscious influence might lead to sex that isn't entirely consensual. The man might be too rough with his partner and uses scripting theory as an excuse. I'm the man, so I'm supposed to dominate you in the bedroom, etc. I can understand that criticism. However, I view this theory as a possible explanation for stereotypes, and not as an excuse to perpetuate them. If someone were to teach this theory in a classroom setting, the notion that you ultimately have control of what does and does not happen in the bedroom should be emphasized. Like this: sexual scripts theory is a possible explanation for why these stereotypes exist, but you as an individual have control of your own desires. If your partner deviates from this script, you can use this theory to understand why you thought it would go a different way in the first place. But you and your partner's want ultimately overrides any narrative that you think you might have to follow. Both of you should verbally communicate what you want to happen in that bedroom. It's up to you, not your history. Sexual scripts theory is less of a concrete idea and more of a possible way to explain some of the mechanisms that perpetuate bedroom stereotypes. Understanding how it both affects and does not affect you as an individual is important. So what does all of this mean exactly? Well, you might start to see the pattern between every single one of these ideas. A group feels threatened by another, so they spread rumors about their manhood, which is falsely linked to behavioral tendencies. These stereotypes eventually evolve into their own kinks and fetishes because they've been around for so long. So now they're attached to excitement rather than racism, which really muddies the waters when it comes to their morality. We're presented with an interesting dilemma. If fetishes perpetuate racial stereotypes, do we have to declare certain fetishes as immoral? Because then you're restricting sexual freedom, which is something that I largely don't agree with. Then you have to ask yourself, if these fetishes are no longer being circulated with the intention of being racist, are they even racist at all? The answer to this, of course, is yes. Intention does not matter when it comes to racism. It either is or isn't. These stereotypes have had real-world effects on people. The BBC stereotype has maintained the idea of black aggression, something we're definitely still struggling with today. It's a belief that sticks around, and that's not a good thing. I don't have a solid answer for you on what we should do about this dilemma, but it's something to consider. If we don't have a definitive answer on what is ultimately the morally correct thing to do, then maybe we can at least make sure people are informed about it. I think we should start briefly covering this topic in sex education courses. Make it a point to show that almost all penises, no matter the background of the individual, fall within the same 4 to 6 inch range. Maintain the teaching that some do not, and you can teach how to handle those kinds of situations. If you feel that you're too big or too small, there's a strategy for everyone. But included in that, you should teach that these stereotypes do exist, and how you can avoid spreading them. It would certainly take a lot of time for these teachings to show their effects, but I believe it would strongly curb these bedroom stereotypes and the damage they cause. This video is an attempt at tackling a very serious topic, and I apologize if it wasn't as lighthearted as I might have advertised it to be. But a serious topic deserves a serious conversation. And as I said before, it's complicated because the reasons these stereotypes persist are different from the reasons they were started. The only thing we can know for sure is that they're harmful, and that we need to do something about it. I hope you were able to find some value in this discussion. Let me know what you think in the comments. How would you solve this issue? We also have a Discord server with a discussion thread dedicated to this video and this video topic. There's also our Instagram where I post safe for work art of Candles, my avatar, and some of my older OCs. Subscribe for more videos if you want to. Thank you for watching. I love you all. Good night.